And we are live. Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of the ServiceNow Live Coding Happy Hour. My name is Dave Slusher, and my partner is
Josh Nerius, also developer evangelist, and happy to be sharing some cool stuff with you today.
All right, so what we're going to do is just go straight into this. Josh is going to be driving today. He's going to show you an application he's working on, and we will just you want to start sharing your screen, Josh? We'll get right into it. Actually, before we do that, what are you drinking today, Josh?
Oh yeah, that's a very important question.
We almost forgot the very important detail of what's happening here.
Looks like we accidentally selected something very similar, although mine doesn't look that orange. So I've got the Ballast Point Grapefruit Sculpin today, and it's the last one in my fridge. Very sad about that, but happy to be drinking it now.
I actually have the Habanero Sculpin.
Oh, okay.
The beer you will not forget that you're drinking.
So you will slow down as you drink it. And,
absolutely. I always refer to it as the best designated driver beer because I could not possibly drink it fast enough to get drunk.
That's awesome.
All right.
Cool.
So if you want to start sharing, let me lock it to you.
All right. Let's see if we can do this. Switch over to the screen. All right. All good?
And it should be, even though I'm talking, it should be locked on you, and we should be good. All right.
All right. Cool. So before we get started, I'll first just give a bit of an overview of what it is that we're working on. So on the developer evangelism team, Dave and myself have a variety of things that we do. So things like writing blog posts, creating videos, white papers, and various things like that. And over time, it's become more necessary to track these in a slightly more robust way. So I think this started out as a Evernote document, and that worked great for a while. And then after a while, that was not enough, and so we ended up going into a Google spreadsheet so we could sort things, and that was great. But there's still not quite the amount of functionality that we want, so we started kicking around this idea of like, hey, why don't we just turn this into an app in ServiceNow? Because, well, A, that would be fun to do, and B, then we can do things like this live coding happy hour while we talk about it. So the app is really going to be data-driven. It's meant to track some simple things around things like what is it that we're going to work on, what is the artifact, some things like how important is it, when should it be due, when was it published, and things of that nature. So at a high level, we want to track blog posts, reblogs, white papers, videos, and apps. We want to track some basic attributes, and I've already started to work on this a little bit here, and I've got the high-level list of requirements here. And then once we have that basic data, we can start to do more stuff with it. So let's visualize some upcoming content. So what does it look like on a calendar? Are we doing a good job of spreading this information out over time? Are we doing too much? Are we doing too little? And then when it gets really fun is we create this content, but then we want to cross-promote it. So maybe we want to post it to Twitter or Google Plus or LinkedIn and various places. So the kind of the pie-in-the-sky future idea with this is to say, let's create it here in the Artifact Manager, hit a button, and then have it go out there and post it and cross-post it and all that good stuff. So that's some future integration possibilities. And but today we're just going to focus on the core. So let me switch over to my ServiceNow instance here, and I can show you what we have so far. I did bootstrap this a little bit, but I did stuff that I would say is mostly boring stuff. Just created tables. If I go over here into the studio, you can see that there's relatively little here. We've got a table called Artifact, and the Artifact table is going to store whatever data about this thing that we're tracking. So some basic information there. We've got some form layouts, access controls, the typical things that you would expect from a basic table, and that's all we've got. I also put in some data just to make it a little bit easier so you wouldn't have to sit here and watch me type this, which is, again, probably about as boring as it could get. And so let's take a look at this. So here's an example. Here we've got a blog post, and actually Dave already wrote this blog post, so this is one of the other things is we want to track things that we've written in the past. And so we've got our type. We're going to track what the type is. We're going to track who it's assigned to. I don't think Dave is in here, so we'll just say that Dave is AbleTutor because AbleTutor is in every single demo, and it would not be right if he wasn't in this one. We've got a state, so maybe we want to propose something. This is just an idea. We can just dump information in here and make it super easy to track this over time. Ready for work, work in progress, and publish. So pretty simple. A couple of priority values. So maybe this is something that we know we want to do, but we're not really keen on it, or maybe it's something we need to do right away.
All right. So let me ask you one question before, because I was looking at multiple screens. This is derived. This is extended from the task table.
So yeah, that's a good question. This is actually not extended from the task table, and I made that decision because when I started out when I was building up the sort of the skeleton here, and when I extended it from app or from task, I just got a lot of stuff that I didn't want. And I wanted this to be a lot simpler and not to have to worry about some of the task things. So in some ways this is task-like, but I think as we start to expand on it and add some of the other functionality, I think it gets further and further away from the true definition of a task.
Okay.
So at least that's how I feel about it today. We'll see if that's how I feel about it as we continue to make progress on it, and then maybe that'll be a case study in how to go back and actually extend from task later, which is basically, throw it all away and start over. So let me just go back here to my Evernote document, my fantastic list of requirements, and we're just going to do a couple more boring things and add some additional fields so that we can track some stuff. And the reason I'm adding these and the reason these are core is as we start to look at things like visualizing this, we have to track a due date, we have to track a publish date, or we can't put this on a calendar. So that's one of the first things we're going to do. Form designer here, pretty standard stuff. And we'll add another one for publish date because these are probably two different things.
All right.
Let's add it to. What's that?
I feel like I should be narrating because you're thinking, but I don't. I don't have that much to say. So
if you have stuff to say, feel free to. It's that crazy thing of trying to type and talk. It's like walking and chewing gum. It's just impossible.
When I do these webinars, it's extremely difficult. That's the absolute hardest part, is trying to type one thing while you're saying a different thing.
Yep, it is definitely a skill that I have not yet learned or mastered. I think we also want a duration because we want to start tracking how long do we think something's going to take, because that might help us make decisions about when we would do this.
Right. This is a feature you and I kind of, as we were spitballing kind of what we wanted out of this. This was the thing we wanted to see is there a way to say that for a given time period we've actually got more time scheduled than is reasonable, that we can't do this in the time allowed, right? That deadlines have to slip because there's not enough time to do everything.
Yeah, exactly. So, so we've got our due date, publish date, estimated duration. I'm going to stop at that for now. We've potentially got some other attributes that we want to track, but I think this at least lets us continue to move forward. So let me go ahead and check these off my list. The other thing we might want to consider is some kind of an effort choice, high, medium, or big, t-shirt size essentially. Right. That maybe isn't tied to an actual thing, but just to make it easy to sort. But we can get to that later. So at this point, let's just make sure this all works. And if you are already familiar with the Forms Designer, then what we've done looks very simple, and this is boring. If you haven't seen the Form Designer, this is as easy as it is. We've just added a series of fields and hit save, and we're good to go.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, let me go back, and I need to add a couple of dates into these existing things, because the next thing I want to do is I want to figure out how I can visualize this, and I have some ideas on how to do it. Basically, I want to go out there and use a library, a third-party library from Google, to try to put this thing on a calendar, to try to plot these things out. But to do that, I need some dates populated in here. So if you have witty things to say, now is a fantastic time.
All right. I'll try to think of witty things. So so I've never done anything like, I have seen people that integrated Google Maps with ServiceNow and things like that. Is it as simple as you have an URL to hit, or are you going to have to do a UI script to pull some client-side code down, or?
So the Google charting libraries are what I'm thinking of, and in that case, it's just like bringing in any sort of client-side, jQuery or any of those things. We may be able to just pull it straight in. For just to make things more stable, it may make sense that at some point in the future we would pull them in statically and store them in a UI script, just to make sure that Google doesn't update it. Because we have had that happen. I've seen that happen with an app before, so something to think about.
Okay.
So, bear with me just one moment here. I'm going to put a couple of dates in. These dates probably aren't going to actually be accurate, but that's okay just because we need something here. And I'm going to have these span just a little bit of time, so we'll kind of go back through July and have a range of things. And then it's not saving, is it? What's going on?
Is it not letting you do it in the past? It looks like it's putting it to today, no matter when you do it in the past.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Well, let's learn about date pickers today. Yeah, when I'm clicking on it, it's actually not selecting when I'm clicking. So let me try this. Oh, all right, well, let me drill into the record. See if it lets me do it from there. And it does, so it's not ideal, but I'll drill into each of these, and then at some point we will take a look at what that's doing. Some kind of list editing oddity.
Let me take a note to that. I'll just put a pin in that, and if we get time, we'll look at that, because that's actually a new one on me. I don't know that I've ever run across that before.
Yeah. And the other thing that I'll just mention that I screwed up while we're doing this is I actually started populating the due date instead of the publish date, but that's okay because I want to mix of both. So some of these are just going to show up as being past due, but that's all right. Because essentially, as we look at the visualization, we want to visualize both what is published and then what's due, which might be something that's off in the future. So we do want to mix of both values. All right, so at this point, we've got some dates, and I'm just going to pull up the page for, let's see, it's the Google chart calendar. And we didn't throw our usual disclaimers at the beginning, but this is not a demo. This is not guaranteed to work, and this has not been done beforehand. So that is something that
we need. Yeah, we need to codify that into some boilerplate text. Not guaranteed to work, not guaranteed to be correct, not guaranteed to be the best way to do anything. It's, this is more than anything, we're just showing the process of how we do stuff. That's what I did last week with the Angular, which, I can't guarantee it wasn't suboptimal. It was just, here's things I was able to make work, by I threw enough spaghetti at the wall that some of it stuck. And so
exactly.
That's kind of what we're trying to do here.
Yeah. Our only rule for this particular session is if it's pre-prepared, it doesn't make it in. So it's not a demo. We're going to see what we can have happen. So with that, I'm going to take the approach of setting up a UI page for now, and I'm going to try to make this UI page somewhat reusable. So if we come back later and if we decide that we want to do something with Service Portal or something else, that maybe we can start to migrate this over. But I'm going to focus on this being inside the main application for the moment. So we'll create a UI page. I'm just going to call this the calendar. And I'm going to put a word here just so we know. You had a question?
Oh, I was going to say, and just the other thing is if you have comments, feel free to leave them on the Google Plus page, and I'm kind of monitoring that. And if you have questions or comments or anything like that out there in the vast ethersphere, then feel free to let us know, and we'll address them.
Yes, excellent point. And hopefully we'll have a better handle on comments this time. We had some weirdness last time, but at least we know where things are going this time around. So at this point, I've got the UI page. I'm just going to create a module really quick so that we can get to it easily. And we'll call this the content calendar, I guess. Want that at some point. And we'll put this into the artifact manager. It's going to be a URL. We'll throw the URL in that we just created. And let's see if it actually shows up. This is the simple stuff, so if this doesn't work, it bodes poorly. It bodes badly for the rest of this. But it is Friday. So, all right, here we go. So we've reloaded, and we'll filter for artifacts. Here we go. Our content calendar is there. So in theory, we've got the UI page ready to go. So I've got the Google Calendar or the Google charting calendar thing here. This is not necessarily a good long-term solution. I think this is more focused on visualizing numeric data and sort of the ranges of numeric data over time. So kind of if you go to GitHub and you see the number of check-ins on any given day, where in this case, I don't think we're ever going to have enough content to want to visualize, oh, we published or are publishing this number of things on one day. It's probably not going to happen, but bear with us. This is this is what we're going to use because it looks like the easiest thing to get going for now, and then we can always adapt this later.
So if you can can you go to that doc page for 1 second?
Yeah.
Back to where you just were. So in there, was that like a JSON-y type string that you pass it to?
Yeah, so what's happening here is we pull in, there's a special loader file from Google that then allows us to load in a variety of various charting things, and then we're adding columns, in this case date and a number, and then we're adding in an array of arrays, and each of those sub-arrays has a date as well as the numeric value. So in our case, that numeric value is always going to be 1. It might be -1 for things that haven't been published yet, just so that we can differentiate them. But that's kind of how we'll start. So I'm just going to, before I even try to hook data up to this, my approach typically is, can I get the example working? So that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm just going to copy this in. I'm actually going to move this stuff down into the client script because I think it's going to be a little bit easier in a UI page to do this, and we can actually, let's see, what is that saying? We're missing the closing of the function, and now we can format it and let's see what happens. All right, so we've got our sample data. Let's go back to our content calendar, and with any luck, nothing happens. So let's take a look. And right off the bat, so we've got containers not defined. Let's just make sure that this makes sense. Okay, and that makes sense because what actually happened here is I didn't copy everything over that I needed to. We need to put this up here in the HTML area where we've got nowhere to actually render it.
Gotcha. So this is validating your strategy of just getting something working with the simplest thing, because you don't want to put all your code in and all your logic and it doesn't work right, and now you can't tell if it's you or the boilerplate or what it is. You just get a dumb simple implementation working first and then go from there.
Precisely. And it looks like we have success, so I'm going to take a drink.
All right, I will too.
There we go. The minor victories. So it was a small sip, not a large one. So at this point, we at least know we have it working, and this is using that demo data. So in theory, all I need to do now is try to start wiring this data up. Now we've got a couple of ways we can do that. We've got the data that's actually in our table. So if I go back, I'm just going to pull this up in a new tab so I can leave it open here. So we've got all of this available to us, and really what we are looking to do is how do we take this, load it up, and then use that to render instead of the hard-coded data that we've got now.
And most of that thing was drawn. Most of that thing was just drawn for you, right? But so you're not telling it anything about 2012 or 2013 or anything like that. You just give it the array, and then it, the library has decided all that stuff. It knows how to lay it out, and it knows which years to show based on the data you gave it, right?
Yep, that's exactly what's going on. Yeah, and that's kind of the beauty of this. One of the reasons that I like reusing code like this, because we're doing a lot less work to hopefully get the result that we're looking for. Now, I think there are additional options, and I'm not going to dig into it now for the sake of time, but there is quite a bit of configuration information here, so you can pass more parameters. And so at some point, I assume you can control maybe what those ranges are a little bit more manually, but we'll get to that if we ever need to.
All
So so at this point, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a very slow approach to this, and I'm just going to see if I can successfully load data out of the table API. And I'm going to use jQuery to do this because we're in the UI page. So we're in our draw chart method, and I'm going to come down under here. I'm going to comment this out. Again, with the not talking while typing. And then actually, I need to remember the name of my table. So let me go over here and copy that. And now
This is where Studio is really comes in handy, because it's such a drag to have to navigate back to another page in the in the interface when you realize you have forgotten the thing and you don't have it in your buffer, or you don't have it in the clipboard. It's like, oh, I don't remember the exact underscore and capitalization everything of this thing I need. So I love being able to just pop over to the thing in Studio.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no, that is a huge time saver. It's crazy how much nicer that is. So I am doing a jQuery.ajax. Something didn't seem right there. All right, so that looks okay. When this is done, we're going to call a function, pass in the data. Should work. And just to see if anything's happening, I'm going to do string for this. It should be an object. Let's just see what happens.
We should see, right, we got nothing because we got no data.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So are you going to need to pass in your token?
I absolutely do.
Okay.
So, so what we can do now is we can pass in a headers object. I think it's headers. And then I'm going to get this wrong probably, x user token. And then it's going to be g_ck. So this is g_ck is going to be available to you. This is your session token, as long as you are in a non-direct UI page. And I actually don't know what happens if you are on a direct UI page. That might be something that we can look into later. But let's see what happens here. So let's try that again. It's still asking me for... Oh, I know why. I'm getting a little too aggressive with my hyphens. There's only one hyphen, not two.
All right.
So I didn't get the authentication pop-up, so that's good news. And boom, I've got a whole bunch of result data coming back. So I'm successfully pulling back every one of those artifacts in the system.
Is it possible to, if you do it a plus one time, can you? Is it going to expand your whole browser window, or is it just going to do the console?
Oh, it looks like I can do both individually. So there we go.
All right, now I see them.
Okay, good. So now we actually want to get into the data itself, and if we look at the response, we notice that everything's in this result object. This is the standard table API, so everything is going to be wrapped inside of this result. And just to verify that, we can do this data.result, and we'll just pass in a 0 index. So this should get us the first item. Let's try that. Scroll to the bottom. Let me just refresh that because I don't know what happened there. Okay, yeah, we do. And so we got our first item, so we at least know that we're able to address that array. So so now what I want to do is, instead of stringifying this, let's see, just comment this out. We should be able to do something like data.results for each. A nice ECMA 5 feature. Not that it matters because this is client side, so this has worked in clients for a while. But
and is it result or results?
It is result, just a single result. Yep.
All right.
Which is a little weird because, yeah, it is. I mean, theoretically, I guess it could
Okay.
be one result, but yeah. And then I'm going to create, because we were doing this before, we were adding rows, so I'm just going to instantiate something here called rows. I'm going to collect these inside. So for each of these, I'm going to say rows.push, and I will pass in an array. And this array is going to be new date. Now, I don't know if this is going to work, but we'll find out. So we'll say item.dueDate. And then we'll just say 1, because this is a single item. At some point, if we wanted to aggregate these and actually determine how many there were, yeah, anyway, we'll figure it out.
Can you pop back over to your console for a second? Let's look at the data before you do that.
Yeah, so the dates themselves are
yeah, that should. I would think that would work.
I think it will. I think it will.
Okay.
So we'll see. Let's go ahead and save.
Like we say, this is experimentally determinable.
Yes. We will know very soon. And of course, I didn't do anything with that, so I don't actually know what it did. Let me do this. After this is done, I'm going to do another console.log. Rows. And so this should at least give us an idea of what our final result looks like. Clear, load. And it looks like it did work. So we're getting a bunch of nulls, but we expect that because we had nulls. You know, a bunch of these are null. But it looks like this is taking those dates and it's turning them into a proper date. So that should be okay. So at this point, in theory, all we should have to do is replace what we were doing here before. So we're doing what we commented out. So data table.add rows. So we've got our list of rows. So we'll do data table rows.
Rows, yeah.
Yeah, that should do it. Is there anything there? I see nothing there. Interesting. I wonder if it doesn't like the nulls because we're passing a bunch of nulls to it.
You want to in your for each, you want to skip the ones with nulls for right now?
Yeah, let me do that. And actually, you know, the other thing I should do here, that's a good point. I'm going to do this. I'm going to track a temporary date and say that d equals item.due_date or item.publish_date. Actually, let me reverse that because if the publish date's there, that's what we want. If it's a due date, then we want the due date. Because in theory, we want either or. And then I can say if I know this is susceptible to truthy and falsy issues in JavaScript, but we're going to just go with that for now. Let's clear that, refresh this. It still doesn't like it. So let's take a closer look at this point and see what's happening.
When I look at your JSON, that actually looked right. It looked like I didn't see any null dates.
Yeah, it looks clean. So that is coming back, which makes me think that maybe I'm doing the add rows somewhere in the wrong place. So let's take a look at that. I think I know what's going on. So because of the asynchronous loveliness that is JavaScript, this done is potentially this is probably executing before the done is actually executing. So I need to move this up into
the callback of the done, right?
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
I love JavaScript, but it makes sense. All right, let's try that. Clear that out. And I see some stuff. I don't know if can you see that in the
it's subtle because it's just instead of light gray, it's white.
Yeah. So you know what? I think I can hack this. What I will do is at the end I'm going to say rows.push, and and I'm going to say new date 2016. I'll just say 12/12, then -1. So in theory, this is going to be on the other end. And because the way this chart works, it's weird. The way this charting library works is kind of weird. It's visualizing based on the range. So, okay, there we go. So now we've got actual blue values. I guess, did I do 2017? I don't know if I realized I did 2017, but either way, it had the desired effect. So this could be...
I'll bet I know what that is. It's a stupid thing where months are zero-based. So, like, days are not, but months are, right? I'm going to guess what that is.
Let me do this. Let me just do 11/11. Let's see what happens.
I think that'll go to December 11th because I think month is 0. This is one of those things that has always driven me mad.
Yeah, that was it. So we are now at December 11th. So,
makes no sense to me, but that's how everyone does these kinds of things.
Yeah, yeah. So here's where this gets interesting. If we actually wanted to continue using this particular charting library, this would potentially work as long as we always represented a single blog post as a 1 and a future blog post, a published blog post as a 1 and an unpublished blog post as a -1, because that will then at least guarantee that we have the range to then differentiate what this looks like. What that also reveals is maybe this isn't the best long-term library to use for this. We'll have to see about that.
But what you have done is you validated the proof of concept that it's not that hard to get the information you want out of the table API and get it into the library. And now it's just a question of which thing are you putting it in.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
And do they all have the same data format or similar data format, or does it vary by component?
That's a good question. So let's take a look. I know there are some other ones out here. So they've got Gantt charts, which probably are not what we want, but just out of curiosity, I want to see what they've got. Yeah, that gets into all sorts of fanciness. That data looks pretty different.
A Gantt chart might not be terrible because what you could do is represent the date and the effort.
Right? That's a good point.
Because you have the duration.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. Now, I guess the one question with that would be, so just thinking out loud here, is if we represent the duration, that would be sort of man hours versus date, actual date, dates that have transpired. If that makes any sense. But yeah, that's an interesting point. We'll have to look at that. Looking at the data itself, it's not that different. So in this case, we're just passing in some basic information. So looks like research, write paper, create bibliography, and then these are kind of, that's interesting.
Right.
So to adapt this, in theory, it wouldn't be difficult. We would just have to do a little bit of additional conversion, but we're already pulling that data back, so it wouldn't be hard to layer that in. So that's one option. What do they have here for? Probably don't want intervals. That's not going to do it. Maybe a timeline. So yeah, they've got timelines. That's not necessarily bad either. Potentially have multiple things happening across various categories. Interesting. Okay. Well, we'll have to play around with that. What I want to do for now, and in kind of the interest of moving forward on the app itself, is we've got sort of the very, very basic visualization happening. Let me go back to my checklist. And so the next thing we had talked about is how do we warn if the scheduled content effort is too high for a given time frame. So in other words, we have a blog post that's due in 2 days, but it's actually estimated to take 30 hours. And that's just not realistic. So we want to figure out a way that as we're logging this stuff, we're sort of checking that. And I'm thinking that it makes the most sense to do that as we go, right? So as each time we add a post or modify a post, that maybe we would do the recalculation. What do you think about that, Dave?
Yeah, I think that makes some sense.
So if we go in here, let's do this. Let's create Let's pull this one up. This one's a little bit meta. We're going to write a blog about the process of building the artifact manager, which is exactly what we're talking about today. So let's say this thing is due August 5th, and let's say we estimate it's going to take 4 hours, and it's assigned to me. And obviously we want to just have this tied to who the assignee is in order to actually make that calculation make sense. So in theory, at this point, what I want to do is I want to go out there and calculate. I want to see, hey, what is the sum total, what is the duration of all of the things that I have assigned to me that are due between now and August 5th.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the one thing it doesn't, or that it won't represent, is how much of those things are done. Like how much progress have we made? So maybe that's something to think about. But we can still, just look at this kind of simplistically. And I think what I would
what might make sense would be to have a bucket of hours per state. You know what I mean? So that you would have, there are X number of proposed hours, like in whatever query. Well, I'll let you do. But you should be able to differentiate that, right? Because the hours on a published state post are different than the hours of a proposed state post, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the only time you would probably run into issues is if you're doing, say, 5 things at once, and 5 things are in the work in progress state, and you're 80% of the way done on all of them but one. Mm-hmm. But realistically, we can code for that when we run into the issue in reality. Because I think at a high level this will still work. So the approach I would take to this is just to start with a script include, because this is logic that you could potentially want in multiple places. So I would want to say, given a particular record, do something like calculate the amount of things that are due between now and a particular date. So just going to start, I guess I'll create a script include for that. And what do we want to call this? So this is in the process of writing code and in development. The hardest thing for me, aside from coding and talking at the same time, is deciding what to call stuff.
How about the classic artifact, either artifact util or artifact manager util, or however you want to.
Yeah, we'll do that. And then at some point, if we ever feel like it, we can abstract this out further and say this is the artifact timeline thingy, whatever. So we'll do that. And basically, we want a method that's going to. How do we want to break this down? So let's take in calculate hours. I'm going to be super verbose and then probably tidy this up later. Calculate effort between now and date. And we have to close the function. Also just do this thing where we will pass in the artifact on initialization. So at this point, one of the things that I will typically do, and I'm just going to sort of share my weird workflow for this, is I will actually call this something. Let me do this. I'm going to take that. I'm going to go into scripts background. It's sys.scripts.do, by the way, if you ever want to go there directly. And I have a tendency to sort of start setting these things up so that I can progressively add functionality without having to go and execute this elsewhere. So I want to try to edit this as as self-contained of a way as I possibly can. Now, this kind of gets us into the habit of copying data in and out of ServiceNow, and I know that's one of the things that we talk about is how do we stay in ServiceNow more by using Studio, avoiding things like Sublime Text or other things like that. But this is just the way I do it, and if anybody has options or better ideas, I'm curious to hear them. So what I'm going to do here is, you know what? Let me simplify this. So I'll just do the initialization. So one of the ways I've done this in the past is I will actually copy the entire script include so that I can just keep running this and running this and running this, and not have to go back and forth and save and whatever. But just to be good, I'll only do the code itself. So I'll copy a sysid and pass that in. And then hopefully you can't hear the dogs in the background from the neighbors. Just to make sure that this is actually running, we'll throw in a debug statement. Same thing here. Let's see that something's actually happening. And it's not going to work, but it happens. So artifact util is not defined, and that's because I'm executing this in the global scope. So I need to go and select my artifact manager scope instead. And there we go. So at the very minimum, we know that our script include is working. We've already got debug data ready to go. And just a note, so gs.debug is, in the past, I used to set up a whole script include for this where I would, I'd manage all my logs and I would do all this sort of centralized logging and tied to system properties. But in scoped apps, gs.debug is pretty much fantastic because you can put this throughout. And it's only going to show up if you have debugging enabled for the application, so you can turn on session debugging for the app. Or if you're doing these background scripts like this, you can. It's going to show up here, so it makes it really easy to immediately see stuff. And if anyone from the Slack channel is watching, logs, and logs everywhere.
And if you forgot to take them out, they're not going to impact production.
Exactly, yeah. And this is in contrast to gs.log, which is something that if you don't have some kind of conditional check saying, hey, if debugging is turned on, then run this, you can really make a mess in your system. You can have logs everywhere. gs.debug is not like that. gs.debug is safe. And very, very useful. So at this point, what we want to do, so to calculate the effort between now and a future date, I guess what we want to do is we want to say, first, give me all of the artifacts that, let me think about this. So we would want all artifacts probably that are not published. So anything that's not published, maybe just anything that's ready to work or work in progress, because let's just go with that. And to do that, I'm just going to say and let me switch over to my other tab because I can do that in Studio and get my table name. And now let's take a look at our states. I don't remember those either. I think we can see those right down here. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe we need to go into the actual state field. And we can see them here. So we want anything that's ready or work in progress. Oh boy, and this is where I can never remember how to do an OR query.
Don't you do an OR query at the end of that add query?
Yeah, I think you can. So I think I can just do this.
Right. I would kind of like to do that. It's got that expect style syntax.
Yeah, I like that as well. And this is a little nicer to look at too than let's see, whip for work in progress. It's a little bit nicer to look at than an encoded query. Nothing against encoded queries, but it just makes it a little bit more well-defined in my mind. And just to make sure this is all working, we're going to say, well, gr artifact next. Gr artifact dot display value. And now we'll get to find out, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say short description because I'm pretty sure right now the display value is a number, and that's not really that useful. All right, so we've got some stuff. Now we're just going to come back here, hit back, hit run again. And so this is, again, sort of my testing cycle. It's very quick and easy to do. Now, immediately we see that nothing happened.
And I think, let's go up to your add condition. Because I think what that's doing is anding.
I think you are correct. I need to add or condition, which is interesting. So add an and to the current condition. Huh.
Right. Apparently so you were looking for a thing that was ready and work in progress, which will clearly never happen.
Yes, yes, absolutely true. And that should hopefully do it. So now we're going further. So that's good. Let's see what it's saying. So cross-scope privileges, cannot call property. Object glide record is object. Dev sync util. Okay. So at this point, this is because of something I am doing elsewhere in the system, I believe. And let me just go ahead and turn that off. This is the joy of having a whole bunch of active things. So just before I do that, one of the things to look at here is, in this case, if you start to run into weird errors that seem to have nothing to do with your current thing, go out there and maybe think about other code you have running, because even though it's a scoped app, you could theoretically have a business rule elsewhere that is a little too expansive. So let me do this. And it should be fairly recent. This is a task for another day, but I was actually playing around with this idea where I wanted to have something that would automatically capture the activities in your developer instance and track that and then easily export it, but this is apparently breaking things. So let's give that another shot. Okay, so we're a little bit better off now. So now what we have going on is we're actually pulling back the Artifact Manager, which is an app in the Artifact Manager, as well as this. So these are the two things that are in scope.
Okay.
So from there, what we want to do is we want to add up the actual duration of each of those. So let's go back here to Artifact Manager, and let's go ahead for, let's just do this. And we'll say that the Artifact Manager itself is going to take, I don't know, let's say it's going to take 16 hours. And then the other one that we were looking at was...
So OAuth.
OAuth, yeah, OAuth 2 step-by-step guide. So let's go ahead and change that as well. And that's going to take a while too, so let's just give that 20. Be very pessimistic in our time frames. Now, this is where I guess we get to learn about glide duration, because I don't know much about it. So I know it's out there. I'm just going to go out to developer.servicenow.com, which is usually where I go when I try to find stuff these days. Let me look under server and glide duration. So we can add a glide duration to another glide duration, which is, I think, exactly what we want.
Do we want to create like you want to start with a glide duration of 0 and then just add everything as they come along?
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So if I do var duration equals new glide duration, let's see what happens here. So for each of these, we're going to say duration.add another glide duration. So I'm going to just guess, and I don't know if this is true, but we're going to guess that the thing that comes back, we might have to get the what is it, estimated? This tab so we can see what the actual thing is. Estimated underscore duration. So that's what we want. Do I have multiple versions of this up? did that go?
Have to. Do we?
I lost it.
We'll have to go back to the playback. That actually, I don't know what happened there.
I don't know what happened there either. So let's do this again. Var duration equals glide duration. And by the way, this is how you instantiate the glide duration script include. We want to show that to you twice. And we'll say duration.add gr artifact dot estimated duration. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen, if that's going to work, but we'll see.
We might have to do some kind of data conversion. You're just kind of rolling the dice to see if that, without any fiddling or coercion of data type, if that just does what you expect.
Yeah, and I'm thinking it's not. So it looks like in this case, yeah, it's trying to coerce this glide scoped element into a long, which it's not. So I'm guessing
let's do dot. You want to do dot get value?
Yeah, let's try that. So just dot get value on the estimated duration itself.
I think so.
I'll try that. If that doesn't work, there's another thing I know I've seen where essentially you do something like get. There's something to get you the underlying object, and I have to look that up, but we'll find out. Cannot convert. So now it's a string, and so it's expecting a long. So it's expecting a glide duration. What we might be able to do. Let's do this. Again, sort of rolling the dice a little bit to see if this is going to work.
You've always got that. You've got that little calculus, which is, I'm just going to press the button, and it may or may not work. And is it less time to do that
Exactly.
than it is to actually go and research on what the correct way to do it is?
Yep, that is exactly right. So, so here's the question that I have now: so how do we actually get? See if we can get the display value. So in numbers of days, hours, and minutes. Because right now, so this code ran. It's not guaranteed to be right yet, but the code actually ran. But it's giving us still sort of this underlying date format, which is not what we want. We want some kind of human-readable, friendly version of this.
Is it actually adding the duration that you added up? Is it adding that to now? Is that where it's getting that funny time?
Yeah, I believe so. Well, because glide duration is still under the covers some kind of date object, but it's calculated to be an offset from some kind of default date. So when you're actually running the system methods against it and whatnot, it knows how to calculate itself. But if you look at it directly, it may not look good. And so what happened there is that didn't work because whatever those two things were that we selected do not equal 17,000 days. So we will need to do a little bit more research on this one. That's an interesting. Let me do this. So to our audience, this is one of the things where with this particular, kind of our goal here is we run into exactly these kinds of things too. And so we go out there and search for this stuff as well. So this is kind of the goal is to go and figure out where do we actually find this stuff. So
yeah, I think our problem is in the constructor of that thing because
yeah, I think you're probably right because essentially what's probably happening here is if we
that value, the value we're getting out from the estimated duration is not the right thing to pass into the new. But I'm not, again, like you, I'm going to actually open a window and do this concurrently while you're doing this because I equally don't know off the top of my head what to do.
Yeah, so something else I'll do, let me try this. Something I'll try to do when I don't know how to use a particular field is I'm just going to go into the dictionary and look for some other duration fields.
I'm going to do a quick look at the page to see if anybody is shouting at us how obvious the answer actually is. I don't see that. I actually haven't seen that. I'm not sure if we're looking at the same place. I haven't seen anything since Robbie Medved commented on the grapefruit sculpin. So.
Okay, nice. What did he say about the grapefruit sculpin?
He said it's like, this is Robbie Medved. Grapefruit sculpin is like straight grapefruit juice at first, but it gets better as you go.
Yes. See, I like grapefruits and grapefruit juice, so that's a good thing.
By the way, we're an hour into this, and I'm about maybe a third of the way into my habanero sculpin.
I'm probably about halfway down, so that's probably about the correct consumption ratio for grapefruit to habanero. So what I'm going to do, because I know that we've got a bunch of duration fields out there, so I'm just going to look on the common Rota roster table. I'm curious to see if I can learn anything about this by finding other scripts that are referring to this.
Yeah, and there's kind of a larger thing happening here, which is that, by and large, I mean, it is really, really common that like your worst problems you have in stuff like this is dealing with the various date formats. I think I probably have had more hair-ripping moments around dates than probably any other data type in my entire career. You know, it's just so many times. Like we saw the exact same thing with the zero-base month, right? You don't zero-base anything else but month in a lot of very common libraries, right? So, you know, like the C printf type things, those are zero-based months. It's like, why is month the one thing that does this? You know, and you know, this notion of we were just having this conversation the other day about the trick is to get everything into epoch as quickly as possible, you know, and then convert it at the last possible second to whatever you needed to display, which is kind of not what we're doing here, and kind of probably to our detriment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, you know, while you're talking about that, I did find this thing here, this get glide object, which I kind of forgot about. But you can call this on a particular field, and it will give you the native representation of that. So what I'm hoping, and I'll find out in a second if this is true, if this is going to give me a glide duration object, which is...
So then that's the one that you're going to pass to the other.
Exactly, yeah. So instead of doing this, I will
instead of doing the new, because I noticed the constructor is either a string of a display value, or it's a number of milliseconds, or it's another glide thing. And probably what we've got there is none of those.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well. So let's try that. So now we're passing in the glide object. Where's feedback when you need them? And let's see. Get glide object is not allowed in scope. So that's fun.
Okay. Let's go back to your scripted code, if you will, for 1 second, and just log artifact estimated duration. Let's just look and see what physically is coming out of that thing.
Yeah, good call. Yeah, so let's do this. Let me get rid of... Let me do this.
So let's see. Let's kind of test our hypothesis about whatever it is that's coming out. Are we getting a date of a string, or is it saying 8 hours, or what crazy thing is happening there?
Yeah, so it's got this weird 1970 date, and from there,
right. So it's got the 20 hours, but it's adding them to the epoch.
Yes.
When we in that original thing. So if we do we have a let me look here for a second. Go to glide record for a minute.
And while you're looking at that, I'm just going to go back to our glide duration on the doc site. I didn't look through everything that we had there. Epoch plus 20 is what AJB is saying. And that should be because when we actually created the artifact, let me just throw the estimated duration column out here, that we estimated that was going to be, I think, 20 hours. So
yeah, right.
Yeah, so that was 20 hours, that was 16 hours, and that's what we're seeing. So, I mean, if we wanted to, and this is probably not a good way, but we can split on this and take the time value out of that.
But
I don't like it.
Yeah, well, it's not going to work if it rolls over 24 hours, right?
That and that's a good question. Yeah, you'd have to deal with the whole thing. Yep, you're absolutely.
Let's. So this is now. Like, this is another thing I don't know off the top of my head is how do we get the long value out of that field? So we need to coerce it. We can't do the get object from a scope.
Maybe if we can treat it as a glide date time, and glide date time allows us to get the long value, if I'm not mistaken.
Let me look at glide date time. You get the get numeric value of glide date time. Let me look at that. Get numeric value. Get numeric value of a glide date time gets you the number of milliseconds since the epoch.
Okay.
So if you do that, that should be the number of milliseconds in your estimated duration.
Well, let's just do this then. We'll say GDT equals new glide date time. And you said it was get numeric?
Get numeric value of
Got it.
that.
So in theory, we should be able to say duration.add new glide duration, something like that.
And let's go ahead and log GDT while we're at it. Or yeah, let's log that to see.
You know what? Let me do this as well.
I'm doing some top. This is dangerous, but 20 hours. 1,200 minutes. So we should have about 72,000. So we have 72 million milliseconds. Something like that. I might be off on some orders of magnitude.
We'll just pass these things to you, and you can calculate them. Let's see.
See, but that's still not. There's still not what we expect, right?
Yeah.
Still something in there. Something in there is still epochifying everything, even when we think we're not doing it.
Let me try. Let's log out numeric and see what we've got there. Yeah, so numeric we've got 576, 720.
Take off 30. Yeah, that is in fact what I expected there.
Yeah. So that's happening. So then what's not happening is what's happening with the duration. Glide duration. Maybe I need to initialize that with 0. And our duration.add, we're doing a new glide duration on that. We will figure this out. So part of what's happening is it's not adding anything. So when I initialize that to 0, by the end, it's not giving us anything at all.
All right, let's pop over to the code one more time. Duration add. Let's do one more. Let's do one more step in here, which is take that into a variable and let's log that variable before we put it in there.
My code is so messy right now that it's driving me absolutely crazy. My OCD is kicking in just a little bit, and you can't see me twitching over here. So our artifact duration is coming back, and we have 20, we have 16. So as we convert it back into that, that seems to be working.
So the other thing being, what
Is there
the?
something wrong? There's got to be something wrong with the ad, I would think. So let's go back to here. And it says we can say, so here's a glide duration, there's one, and then there's another, and then answer equals duration dot add duration 2. I wonder.
Why don't you try get display value?
I think it's not mutating the duration. It's returning a new duration. Based on what this is saying.
Oh, this is the classic JavaScript problem. Yeah, so go back to your script include.
Yeah, so we need to collect.
Right. So when you're doing the ad, go to the line where you're doing the ad.
Yep.
Duration equals duration ad.
Yes.
This is where it behaves. This is where it behaves differently than everything else you would expect.
Yep. Yep. And it's one of those things too where it's not. Yeah, and here we go. 1 day, 12
exactly
hours.
What we expect to see. Okay.
Beautiful. So so at that point, I'm going to take a nice big sip of my grapefruit sculpin.
All right. So we are at this point. We're just over the hour. Do we want? Is there something else you want to do at this point, or we don't want to kind of call success on this case?
Yeah. So
session.
Yeah, I think at this point let's wrap it up because it is past the hour. But basically, just to summarize what we've done very briefly, is we'll go back. We've got our basic artifact manager, and we have successfully visualized or started to visualize what the calendar might look like, and there's definitely some work to do there. Mm-hmm. And then we've started the process of building out our library that we'll use for sort of calculating the amount of duration and whatnot. So definitely some work to do here, but I think that was kind of a nice little case study in how to deal with date and duration calculations. So
like very much like when we did this, the first time. Bearing in mind too, if you're new to this is only the second time we've done this, and again, it was not there was not a whole heck of a lot of planning that went into it. We more or less decided to learn experimentally everything that's going on here. We've had no production meetings. We just decided you're watching our production meeting, right? So but in each cases we've actually we've had problems happen during the thing that I thought I'm glad that we had them, because that's exactly the kind of problem that you run into in your day-to-day work, right? You're going to do I will do exactly this, where I think that I'm adding it to the object, but I'm not. I'm returning the summation of those objects.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's those things that you start to work on it and you think it's going to be the easiest thing in the world, and then you quickly realize that oh boy, I didn't think about that. So
right, and I do like your strategy. I thought it was very sound of you. Of you building the widget with the dumbest implementation, right? So you can again just make sure that if you did the whole thing all at once now and it doesn't work, is it your table API that's not working? Is it your which part is not working? So I like to also do that where you have there's no question that it's the logic that's working, because there is no logic in there yet. It's just some hard-coded stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Take all the questions out. Take every last bit of uncertainty away. And then I really like to do that with the script includes as well, if you can. To try to build your script includes in such a way that they don't depend on other things, so that you can execute them in isolation in the background. You can keep layering on your code and piece by piece until you get it right.
Yeah, that is one of the challenges in ServiceNow development, is that when the code that you're doing is data dependent, and it's dependent, you're doing, say, a business rule, and you're doing other stuff, and all this is happening, to execute all that in situ can be challenging, right? Or it can just be burdensome to start the moving pieces that cause all that stuff to happen. So, like, being able to isolate it, even if that code was happening from a business rule, what you're doing actually made a lot of sense to pull the code out of the business rule into a script include, test the script include by itself, and then just call it from the business rule.
Yeah, and something you can do to do that, and in this case I was just passing in the sys-ID, but even if you wanted to pass in, say, the value of current in your business rule, as long as you're passing that in and not assuming that variables are going to exist, you can very easily sort of create your test essentially setup script to say, I'm going to initialize this dummy value and then run my logic against it, and then it doesn't matter if it's here or if it's in the business rule.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right, with that, I think we're going to call this a wrap. So let me double check one more time to see if we got any comments or questions. I don't believe we did, or else I'm looking in completely the wrong spot. So dates are evil. That's the comment that we got. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm not gonna disagree with that statement. So. All right, with that, thank you everybody who watched live. Thank you everybody who's kind of watching after the fact. And if you have any feedback on this, feel free to leave it on the Google Plus event page or on the YouTube page, and we'll kind of comb through that and use this to refine the next one, which are not guaranteed to be every Friday, but I kind of like this. I think this is a fun way to wrap the week.
I agree.
I like the structure. I mean, let's be honest, coding is fun, and we don't do this a lot. Actually, we very seldom do pair programming over the internet, so it's actually kind of fun to do it. So.
Yeah, and so yeah, for future ones, give us feedback if you have any ideas, and then if you don't have any ideas, we might just continue on the path of trying to make progress on the things that we're building for ourselves. So there's plenty more to do in this app.
Right.
That we can always get back to later.
And the thing that we're not doing in any of these, and we sort of made a executive decision not to do it, is we're presenting no toy demo code. Everything we have ever shown in this, and the plan is to always, we're showing actual things that we're working on that we care about. This is not throwaway demo code. This is something we want to have working when we're done.
Yep, absolutely.
So, all right, with that, thank you, Josh. Thank you, everybody, and we will catch you again next time. Cheers.
Thanks, Dave. Cheers.
All right. All right. Bye.
Bye.